Two, and
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to a new episode of Social Confoes. It's the first week of November. Sean-Luc, how are we doing?
we're doing pretty damn well, I must
We
say.
just had a social media conference last month. We had an amazing time. We had
Yeah,
a
I mean, I have to tell the people because for those who weren't there, Diego went all out. Diego owned the space. He had his NFT Adidas tracksuit on, which really, if you miss him then, I mean, then you're probably blind. He had his Fecon shirt, hoodie on. I mean, he committed to what he is about. So I love that. I love that. I really love that you had the whole style for the conference planned out. And I only planned out one outfit, only the outfit for my keynote. That's the only one that I planned out. But Diego had it fully planned out. I love it, man.
well, to be fair, the only thing I had planned out was a tracksuit. The networking party was just a happenstance, and the first day with Leslie, I had to match his energy, so I came in a suit. So otherwise, that
Oh,
would
oh, that's also, yeah, I forgot to mention the soup part. But again, I loved the energy, man. I really loved it. And yeah, the tracksuit was awesome. We both for our talks we came prepared. We had an idea what we wanted to
and I do
represent.
gotta say, from the past 7 years, this conference has been it's only been getting better year after year, and definitely, if you miss this one, you better not miss the next one.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to match the surprises. I think we had amazing surprises this year at the conference. So I think that's gonna be hard to match. From a speaker perspective, the speakers that are approved for next year are top of the line. So I'm excited about that as well. And yes, I mean, for the last 7 years, we have consistently grown this conference to a point where I'm really excited for next year. Like, really, really excited. So I think that's one of the things that definitely I'm proud of. But the level of surprise elements for this year's conference in a positive sense, in things that we wanted, but we're not sure that were gonna be possible, that's insane. I think that's
Yeah,
insane.
yeah.
Yeah.
The surprise visit from an international vlogger from a different continent. Shout out to Widamaya.
Guatemala, yeah, definitely. That's it. And Guatemala is still like 2 weeks in, still in Suriname. Of course, there's reasons for it. He explained it as well. I mean, as a travel vlogger, you have to make a lot of content. You have to edit a lot of content, and you don't always have a space where you're able to properly do that. And I think he and his team, because he of course has his own cameraman, for them to edit here and to be at peace in a country where they feel at home. I mean, it does help. And we're getting a lot of jealousy right now from African countries and other countries that he has been staying in Suriname for so long. So that's pretty cool. It's also cool that he visited us at the conference. It's also cool that we were able to give him a time slot to at least tell a little bit about his story, which was a very amazing story. And although we didn't fully follow up on the creator's part because he did establish that he would be open to talk with creators locally, he already what he did for us is it's hard to ask for more. Then we also had the women's national team football, or if you're in the U.S. soccer, who paid us a visit during the opening and the opening keynote, which was really cool as well. And then, last but not least, the partnership with Unasat, which is local university that's going to partner with the conference to allow there to be an certified or at least an official um, courses, but also the opportunity to have an associate's degree on social media marketing. I mean, that's really,
Yeah, I think there's definitely
yeah,
demand for that, and it needs to be there to close the gap between the development cycles of the technology and of the platforms. And before we go to the topic, one thing I do want to say, closing, referring back to Wodamaya, I listened to his presentation, and one thing that stuck out for me was he mentioned, yeah, everybody sees him traveling. As you mentioned, the people in Africa are jealous of him that we're hosting him. And he said the amount of content he needs to edit, what you see on social media, it's all the glam and glory. He goes to places, but what he mentioned is people don't see the struggles that you go through behind the scenes, the content that you need to edit, the permissions you need to get, the hurdles, the borders you need to cross to just show people different sides of the world. It's also a testament in itself. So I'm really happy
I
to share
think,
that. And
yeah, and in a different way, Paco de la India also kind of showed us
yeah,
a similar struggle. And I think what Amaya said, what I really found interesting is that, hey, at least you're able to monetize Facebook. For some of us in Africa, in the bigger countries with tens of millions of population, they're not even able to monetize certain aspects. And I just got a question about that as well that I have to follow up on, because there are people in Suriname that are realizing, hey, we can monetize things. But then the next question becomes like, how do you connect? And I think that's also kind of what we're talking about in this episode, will be about whether things are really like it's being said, or it's kind of like this pipe dream that never really gets fulfilled. So I think that's also one of the things that we have to be wary of, that if you have a structure or you live in a society where everything works, the structure works,
yeah,
you should understand how privileged you are, because I don't think a lot of people understand how privileged they are when they are in a society or in a country where everything is already been
connected.
thought out, connected, and structured and working.
And just on that note, I'm not sure if you saw the post or someone shared it. There was I think a U.S. visitor. He went to Guyana and then he went to Suriname. I think in Western District, Nikeri. They were low on cash already.
which
He was
which is a
in
cash
travel.
district. People have to
Yeah,
understand, like, this is like one of the main cash districts of Suriname, where there's everything is done by cash, but like only local currency. So that's another annoying thing.
yeah, and they couldn't use their cards. They couldn't use the ATMs. Uh, they have money, but they just couldn't access it, and that just goes to show that if there's no the infrastructure is not in place, you can't really accommodate. Depending on where you are, of course, in the capital, it's more accessible, but it's one of the hurdles you need to overcome.
So and this is where I get like, because during my studies, I mean, everything was about globalization. Everything was like, we're living in a globalized world. Everything gets more connected, and I wanna, and this might surprise people, or people might get even a little bit angry on this, but it works the other way around too. Like, there are people from developing countries who plan everything,
Yeah,
like into details, go with three different credit cards to the US and experience something that is similar but even worse, because for them it's a plane ride back and they can't do anything on vacation because their cards aren't working. So
yep.
it's like this disconnect between different
I've
parts of
had
the
the same
world.
thing. I
Yeah,
had my card not work abroad as well.
yeah. So and just to avoid this, like, this is a real issue, because this is real bad publicity for our country, but for travel in general. And I don't think enough people understand. Like people want to relate it directly to Suriname, but it's just a bad travel story. Like it makes people want to travel less, not just to a specific country. And um, I think people underestimate that part of travel as well, how much you have to like um,
Plan ahead.
pre yeah a research plan ahead, but also the reason why it sometimes is better to work with a travel agent, which then of course also leads to situations where people get scammed by travel agents or don't get the actual. So like there's no win in this. The only
There's
win
always
there,
a risk. There's
yeah,
also
there's
always a risk.
always this risk.
If you want
And
to
I
offset it on yourself or to someone else, and
exactly,
what do you want to offset for their convenience?
yeah. So I think that's definitely that you decide your own risk. I think that's a very, very important thing to take into consideration. And changing for yourself, changing yourself for the better, it often requires risk. The easiest thing is to stay put and say, like, I'm comfortable where I'm at. This is how it's going to be. And then it's done. And then you can blame everybody else for things that aren't working, aren't going your way. So before we get into the topic, you get to do a little plug. Uh,
Yeah. So forgot the intro. We had a little segue as we were introducing. So if you're tuning in, don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel, youtube.com at Confoes. Follow us on Instagram and also subscribe to our newsletter, confoes.substack.com. We are working on a second edition, so that's coming into your inbox quite soon. And last but not least, we're slowly integrating some stuff. We talked about payments. We have a QR
wow.
code that you could scan. For now, it's only going to one type of payment method, but we are planning to expand that for different types of payment methods locally, and the different types. So that's if you want to help support us, this is just
So
some
we
integration.
don't have a
If you're-
Patreon. We don't have an OnlyFans. You can also subscribe paid on Substack. But if you want to send us a tip, feel free to scan the QR code at the top. And with that being said, I think it's
Let's
time
get to
for our
it.
topic.
Yeah. So bust, bubble, or business, what are we talking about here?
Okay, so basically, for the past year, there have been a lot of revelations in the tech space. All of these tech space revelations have become things that are broadly discussed in the world. Um, I even considered throwing Instagram threads in there, but I decided not to. So let's look at what I believe are five of the major developments that have gotten a lot of attention and quickly discuss between us if you feel that this has been a bust, a bubble, or business.
So before we go into that, how would you differentiate bust, bubble?
Okay, so a bust is really it really busted. It never really succeeded in any sense. It's just a complete bust. Like it's we can it goes down in the history books as a failure. Like
Uh,
MIDI discs, for instance, right? Never really succeeded.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
A
And
bubble
bubble
is
is
something
has
that boomed.
potential. Yeah.
No, it actually boomed, but it can still become a business. But yeah, it too many people got into it for the wrong reasons. People got greedy, and in the end, uh, it didn't end up being a sustainable business model for the masses. And then, of course, business is something that you do feel succeeded and became something that we could work towards.
All right. You said you had five things. So what are we starting off with?
So we're starting with the most beautiful one, Bitcoin.
Well, I think this is a special case, right? If you scan this QR code, you can send us some Satoshis. And this is just proof that it is, for me at least, a viable implementation into our, day-to-day business. It is an alternative. So for me, it's business.
Yeah. I think the use cases have been enough. I do think that there's enough. The only thing that makes it difficult, and we've been through this uh, recently, is that I don't have a good Bitcoin experience, and that's also why it's for me between bubble and business, because at this point it's a continuous bubble to business, bubble to business, bubble to business model. Um, I have noticed that like it's extremely quiet at the moment when it comes to Bitcoin. And I know when the halving gets closer, it's gonna pick up again.
Yeah,
But
6 months to go.
for me, it's really not a business model if it only works one every 4 years.
Now, see, you're now there's a different discussion to be had on the
Yeah,
way we perceive Bitcoin, because
yeah,
I won't categorize it in these three itself, because it's a tool. It's not, there's no company behind it.
yeah. But still, there is a business model. The only thing, and this is I
The
also already
the
said it.
business model is for speculators and investors.
No, there's
And
also
then
business model for payments, right? And
yes,
from that sense, there are other payment systems that are more trustworthy and more reliable at the moment than Bitcoin. And that's the concern. That's my
so
major concern.
s-
No, this is like no. You have to
yeah,
understand, right?
I
And let me
understand
let
where
me
you're
let
going
me
with. No,
let
I
me phrase
completely
it.
understand
Yeah,
your where you're going
yeah.
at, but the phrasing and the words you're using are throwing me off.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay. So let me explain, right? The idea behind Bitcoin is really that you own your own wallet, that you have control, and that wherever you are in the world, you're able to transact. And there's a scalability issue with Bitcoin as to you have to transfer Satoshis and not transfer Bitcoin because that wouldn't make sense. So, what happened is because the price of Bitcoin is so high, it's pretty damn expensive. And you get into the gas fees as well. And now you have the Lightning Network, which is supposedly solving this issue. But then again, what happens with the Lightning Network, whereas with your own wallet, Bitcoin wallet, and this is something I feel it's not being addressed enough. With your own Bitcoin wallet, you basically own your own wallet. It's your own risk, it's your own reward. With the Satoshi Lightning Network, you're still too much reliant on third parties. It's really hard to really properly own your own Lightning wallet in the sense that you would own your normal Bitcoin wallet. And that brings an extra layer of trust and security that I feel is not at the level that it's scalable to the
Yeah,
rest of the world.
agreed. The
Yeah.
maturity isn't there yet.
Yeah.
It's in
So when
usability,
I say
scalability, and security.
when I say there are other apps like Venmo, like or companies like Wise or other kind, even PayPal, even though PayPal has its issues, and I'm not a fan of PayPal at all. There are
Me
other
neither.
options. There are other options that for the masses at the moment work better as payment than where Bitcoin is.
Oh
And
yeah,
we have to be
I'm
honest about that.
I'm not arguing against
Yeah.
that.
So I think that's my major concern at the moment from an innovation perspective, from what the possibilities are for Bitcoin, what the boundaries that Bitcoin is pushing. I'm definitely still on the bandwagon. But when it comes to being there as a business, and I'm not talking about an investments business, investing in Bitcoin, but I'm solely talking about Bitcoin as a payment method, where we're not that far yet. We're still in the early phases. And for me, the issue with Bitcoin, I know it's more with other crypto, but my issue as well is it only gets attention when the halving is close or the halving has just passed. That's when everybody talks about it. And it's kind of put like in a refrigerator for the majority of the people until the next halving. And that's why I'm not completely convinced that we're at a stage yet that we can talk about it being a proper business.
And that's exactly why I would say this is the time to learn about it, because it's so quiet. It's there. There's no noise. There is no, the chances of getting scammed are lower because people aren't chasing after you. People
Yeah.
aren't trying to sell you something. So these quiet
This
moments are the
is
times to
this is the time to
try things,
invest
like
and to
we're
understand
doing
how it works.
practice.
Yeah.
See, before I set up this QR code, I tested it a few times. I deleted the wallets, reinstalled it, put it on a different device just to see, uh, understand the workings of it, the sequencing of it, and what goes through it.
And I think that's the best part about Bitcoin that people are not ready to understand. It's learning how to really be independent from a structure and a governmental structure. I think that's like it's something that people might perceive from a negative perspective as well, but it's a positive. You're understanding how completely autonomous models work. It also makes you appreciate the structures that are
Yeah,
in place already a little bit more,
the convenience that you
right?
get for some things, but of
Yeah,
course, you understand the risk that's associated to this.
yeah.
What's the probability of something going wrong?
So, like when you lose your keys, for instance, which you hopefully never do, you start
Yeah,
valuing. You start valuing like, hey, reset my password, which is available for social media platforms, for instance. There's like, hey, reset my keys. Yes, you can reset your keys, but you need to have the seed phrase that's required to reset your keys. So if you screw up yourself personally, um, you learn the hard way.
yeah.
Whereas,
One of the big questions you need to ask is, how much do you trust yourself versus how much do you trust someone else to do it correctly?
exactly,
And it's okay to not trust yourself with certain things and know that you defer to someone else, but understanding that is as important, as well. So
awesome. I think
next up,
we're largely in agreement. So let's go to the next one, and that's cryptocurrency, bust bubble or business.
Bob, I would put it in bubble. I would put this in bubble territory. It's There's too much noise. There's still developments going on. It's basically like, it's like startup life. Startups are a bubble. um, you you have to have people that try different stuff, and when you have that, you get 80-90% more surrounding it that just try to, blow it up, overvalue it. They go with the hype. They go, try to raise money.
Is it
Some
the new
people just
hustle
straight up try
culture?
to scam.
Is it the new hustle culture?
I wouldn't call it
Like,
hustle.
yeah,
I wouldn't
because
even
it's
call it
like, hey,
hustle.
this doesn't work, so let's create a new one. But then I think one of the
I
major
I would
issues, yeah,
I would call something under bubble is trying to sell solution, finding problems for solutions that you made. That's how I would, identify something in a bubble. It's You made something and then you try to find a
no, for me, a
problem and try
bubble
to
is
match it.
really something that exploded and was awesome until people realized that there wasn't that much to it that we originally thought.
And the reason it gets like that is because people overvalue it. They go with the hype. They
Okay.
think it solves something, but they clearly it does not.
So where it became worrisome for me is the forking and not communicating clearly or understanding clearly what the result of a fork is. Like for many people, and this is something that you have to understand. If you have a loaf of bread, right, and you view a hard fork as sharing the bread, half of the bread goes to one person, half of the bread goes to another person.
Well, if you hard fork in the
Yeah,
context of what we're talking about,
yeah.
you get two
There's two
breads.
loaves of bread,
There's two
but
loaves of bread.
yes, but the bread used in reality in traditional economics, the bread loses half of its value,
Yeah.
right?
The value is the same.
For the
You
two
get the
breads,
fork.
the value of
Yeah,
the
the
breads, two
total
breads,
value is the
is the
same.
same as the one bread
And
beforehand.
over time, the
Yeah,
value will shift towards the better bread, whereas the other bread
exactly.
gets molded and
So,
the other bread stays fresh.
okay. And so what happens is that while that might be the case, there are people selling off slices of bread in the early
As if it's,
stages
yes,
as if it's the same
the whole
value
bread.
and it's twice the
Yeah.
amount, which completely devaluates the bread. So, and that's I think that's really, and because there haven't been real consequences with the endless hard forks, and especially hard forks where there's a new cryptocurrency coming out of it, it's like how long and how often can you slice until something becomes worthless? I think that's something that, yeah, is something that hasn't been talked about enough. It's kind of like, hey, we don't get along enough. We have a company together. There's like people that have a certain speciality. And what makes the company strong is that you can go to these three different people within the company that all have their expertise. And you decide to, you know what, we're going to split the company up. And one of the partners leaves and starts their own firm. Like, what made them strong with the others together, that has kind of left. Of course, that person can hire new people, but you don't have the strength that you had when you were together. And it's like almost the unwillingness because opinions and ideas and visions are so far, they differ so far that you kind of split everything up. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. It's like everything's being split up. We can't get along. Okay, we're not gonna work towards um, understanding each other and having empathy for each other. It's just easier to split up and go our own way. And I feel like with cryptocurrencies that has been the case. Like, okay, yeah, but I want this different. Like we agree on 80%, but this 20% we don't agree on. So let's do a hard fork and completely split the currency in two different kinds of cryptocurrencies. And there has not been enough, first of all, talk about it, but also understanding the consequences of continuously doing that. For people, it's been like, hey, I'm getting both currencies in my wallet and I'm twice as rich, instead of understanding, like, no, you're actually gotten weaker.
And on that note, I would even say that's the minority. The majority of the crypto devaluation comes from not even real crypto stuff. It's just the branding around it. It's like that. The the promise of solving the issues that the core teams can solve, and selling people on that idea, that's what's going on, if you're asking me. And then you just create some kind of vanity token for people to feel like they own something, whereas you just create it from thin
I
air.
think it's nice to call it a vanity token, and that's I think is a great way to put it. Unless you get enough use cases for it and it works. And I
Yeah,
do feel,
and to get
um,
that you need
yeah,
time. That
yeah,
takes time.
yeah. And also, you can hand. I do believe at in the end of the day, there will be cryptocurrencies, and I'm of course separating Bitcoin as the original from everything that came from it. But there will be cryptocurrencies that will have more value than currencies of nation states.
Oh yeah.
I do think that's a very, very big possibility that in 10, 20 years time, that will actually be the case.
Like right now, it's already the case for
Oh yeah,
some.
but that doesn't guarantee it's going to be there, because the nation state actually does have a control a system in place, which might be a terrible system, but it's still a system in place compared to cryptocurrency that it's completely reliant on a non-existing, at least from a geographical perspective, is working with a non-consisting structure, non-consisting physical environment that can be viewed as that makes it difficult. And I think also we have to understand that nation states, especially the Western countries, are not gonna leave the situation where it is now. They're gonna continuously push for regulation with everything, and people also have to understand that
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
all
gonna
about
be
control.
the same space in 20 years time as it is now.
And that's why you gotta keep ahead of the curve. And coming or being born out of the cryptos or the ICOs.
So would you say that was the second wave? If the splits and the forks were like the first wave, would the ICOs be the second wave?
Yeah, I do consider the ICOs the second phase, and that's basically the phase I got introduced. Like right before that phase, I got introduced to it,
Okay.
and then s- you get faced with euphoria, you get faced with um, the hype, and that's the learning cycle. But yeah,
If
I would.
somebody would step up to you, let me ask you this question. If somebody would step up to you and say like, "Hey, the only reason ICOs exist is because businesses were not stable enough. Those businesses were not stable enough to get IPOs, and the ICOs was kind of used for businesses to start up that weren't able
Yeah,
to get an IPO."
I agree. Not only that, but just to get money from people. There've been tons of projects that weren't even legitimate businesses, and they just put in ICO just to tag along. And
Okay.
I agree with you. It's the IPO thing.
Oh, I didn't say that. I was just saying if somebody came up to you, but for people who are less familiar with these terms, I think it's also good to
Oh
elaborate a
yeah,
little bit on it.
and then
So an IPO is an initial public offering, and enable to be eligible for an initial public offering, you need to comply with certain rules. There's compliance to get into an IPO, which involves banks and approval from even the central bank in your
yeah,
company in your
and
country.
IPO basically you go public, so the individual retail people like you and me can buy a
Can buy
share of the
shares.
company and become a
Yes.
part owner in that sense. And
Yes.
that's a way to raise money or raise capital for
For your
the business
business.
to do
If
their
you want to
development, to do
expand, if
their
you want to no longer
expansions.
be a family business, if you want to, like be owned by the public instead of being a privately owned company, and this is something that it's always a discussion whether or not you should do it. But in many cases, with the IPO, you lose kind of part of the control of the company, but you gain a lot of finances from it as well. So I think that's in a short the IPO, but then the ICO is an initial coin offering, which basically it's the same thing as an IPO, only
Without
it
the
isn't
rules
without
and
the regulation,
regulations.
without the regulations, and everybody can buy in. Like with a public offering, you really still have to do it through the legal route, the traditional route, whereas ICO, like
Where
anybody
and
could just
even
throw money.
there,
Yeah,
it's kind of iffy. The regulations only favor some. And do you know, in the states, what uh, when you're qualified to be a accredited investor? Do you know what the qualifications are to be an accredited investor?
oh, please tell me. I'm really interested in hearing this.
It has nothing to do with your investor knowledge. It's either you make a certain amount, I think few 100,000 or some at least six figures a year,
Okay.
or you need to have a net worth of, I think, at least 1 million, and then you're
Okay.
considered a accredited investor.
Okay.
That's about it.
Interesting. That's
That's
interesting.
about it.
Okay.
So
That's pretty
someone
interesting.
who has that money but has no knowledge about investing whatsoever is can technically be an accredited investor.
Okay. So what I think, which is good, what the ICO did, they kind of made everybody, gave everybody the opportunity to be an investor. But I think it's also the Achilles heel of everything. It's like you make everybody an investor. So
No one is.
so there's no real due diligence at this point. I think that's the major issue. Like at least with an IPO, there has to be due diligence in place
Yeah,
on
there's some
multiple.
handrails there, some
Yeah,
bumps, speed bumps to deter
yeah.
people.
And the ISO was like, at first, I was really positive about it. For me, it was a bubble because it showed enormous potential until you realize, like, oh yeah, there's a reason why there's regulation for these kind of things. That's the whole thing for me.
But also, it was a good, for me at least, a good learning curve to understand the broader world, not just crypto ICOs, but how business works,
How business
how
works.
shareholders work, how they raise capital, how they use that capital when they're profitable. That gave me, that was my step into understanding business on a deeper level, actually.
Do you feel, and I'm going to make a stepping stone to the next one, do you feel the ICO models, even though it ended up for me being a bubble, created a pathway for developments in the future of how to raise capital? Do you feel that we should at least give the ICO era a little bit of credit to creating awareness and inspiration for what was to follow from a technological perspective, or from a seeding
Mm,
or a funding perspective? Or do you
I,
feel like if the ICO era wasn't there, it the developments would have gone the same?
I think the developments would have gone the same, honestly. What I do think is for 90% of the people who got burned by it, they're gonna fall into the next scam, which might be NFTs. But
Oh,
the
that's
10,
interesting.
but
That's
the 10,
really interesting.
maybe 5% that actually stuck through it and actually went. I do think there's a small group that, although they got burned, got better from it because they got to understand how things work actually. And then there's a minuscule group that just won the lottery, like maybe a 0.5%.
Okay, but then another take. Can you compare ICOs to early IPOs?
Yes.
So it's not like it won't work in the future.
Then it will be basically become an IPO technically.
Speaking.
It's basically you're dressing it in something else. But if you look at
No, but
the
you just
the
mentioned what
cogs
it takes to
behind
be
it,
an investor, right? So
that to be on paper accredited investor, not an investor. Those are two separate
yeah,
things in
okay,
my, yeah.
but still, you can also look at from perspective that the ICO era opened up the situation for small scale investing, and that's now something that it's even taken into consideration with regulations, where it previously was like, yeah, but you don't have the money, so why would you? Or you don't have the network, so you
But
don't have to invest. It
the
kind of it
the what
shifts, right?
accredited investor get access to is get in really early because the risk is greater. The IPO is after everything, all the risks are minimized. Then the general public gets access to that. But then, because all the risks or almost all the risk is removed, the returns are also minuscule that it's not attractive.
Yeah.
That's
But
basic economics and basic
so are you going to give the ICO
risk
era
reward.
credit? Are you going to give the ICO credit for understanding what it means to get in early into projects and buy in early, and also having the possibility for somebody creating something that there are people that are more willing to buy in early, even though they know it might not be successful? Because at the end of the day,
For a
everybody
small group,
watches.
yes. For a
Yeah.
small group, yes. But for the larger majority, I don't think so.
Okay, that's interesting because
I don't
we
think so.
all look we all look at why can't I what's the Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, and we also envision us, not everybody, but a lot of people envision themselves being on that panel, being a Mark Cuban, getting there and being like interested in like, what do I want to invest in this, and the little extra money that I have, what would I invest it in? So from that perspective, I do kind of see like it has been more integrated where people are now understanding that they can
what I
invest in
what
something.
I think that you're seeing or observing is frequency bias because you understand it better. You notice other people who understand it better. But
Yeah.
the majority, if you don't have the fundamental understanding of budgeting and saving and all that, they're gonna fall for it again. And
Oh,
that is why I'm saying that's my stance. Like I don't think it meet much of a dent. For a small group, maybe a 5%, they did get better from it. But for the majority,
they
85,
lost out.
90%,
They lost out.
yeah.
Okay. So then the next in line, which I consider the third wave after the ICOs didn't come back the same way they were there in, I think, 16 and 17, 2016, 2017, when it was like really peak ICO world. Then we got into the next wave, which was the next halving, which was 2020, 20, yeah, a little bit around that time, was the NFT space. So looking back, as
This
somebody
is
who
what
were,
did yeah, this is what you dabbled in yourself as well,
yeah.
more than the ICO era. So I'm curious to hear your
So from somebody who
observations.
were an NFT, a physical part of an NFT, to a social media conference, how do you feel about the NFT era?
For me, like obviously, I always try stuff. Just like I always try the extremes, finding payment methods, seeing if I actually get the product. This was a gamble for me, to see if they would actually deliver. And it's from Adidas, a world-renowned company, and they
What
delivered.
was the gamble? So let's because you mentioned it's Adidas. Like Adidas isn't a small company.
Exactly.
It's a
So
worldwide. So
you
what was the gamble? Why wasn't it uh, 100% sure thing?
because there's a lot of hype around it. There's too much hype. It doesn't matter how renowned the company is when it comes to product. If you ever bought stuff or back projects on Kickstarter, the
Oh, I'm
promises,
still
the
waiting for a drone.
demonstrations,
I'm still waiting for a drone
etc.,
from
can be
China.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yet when it comes to distribution and delivery, that's a whole different ballgame, and especially worldwide delivery. So getting remotely into it, that was one challenge in itself, and that was pure luck. I think it was a 0.1% chance that I even got through to purchase that NFT. There are so many factors at play there, and then actually getting the products delivered, but seeing that it can work, because this was a proof for me, like if there is an actual business behind it and it's not just promises, false promises for a solution that you haven't even built yet for a problem that doesn't exist, it can work. And this was clearly, you buy the token, you're part of the gamification of this new kind of culture or brand that they're trying to build, with the Adidas flip sideways and kind of being more, I don't know which direction they're going at now, but tying a physical product to that, to your Adidas fans to the sports fans to the sports culture is something. Do you need an NFT to deliver that experience? No, but it can be possible, and they've proven the case. If they're gonna stick with it, build on it, maybe integrate it into a virtual world, maybe that's their next game. But I can't predict the future.
Was
But
the approach wrong? I feel NFTs only work from a fandom perspective.
uh, even that, I would say, is a biased
I
view.
truly I at this point in time, I only truly believe NFTs work if it's from a fandom perspective. If it's a collector's item as a fan of something.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. So that's another biased perspective.
Yeah.
So it's what works for you, right?
Yeah.
Because originally, the core group that were drawn to NFTs were artists.
Yeah.
That was the a way for them to stamp ownership, especially on digital art, and
Yeah.
create digital scarcity to get the
Yeah, but
authenticity.
who gets a piece of art? You have to be a fan of the artist to get a
Yeah,
piece of their art, right?
yeah. Not even the artist, the art.
Yeah.
It depends, right? If you look at the classical traditional art, even that is a shady business, and you need accredited investor money to even get into those
Yeah.
auction houses. So yeah, it's a you know I can't say it's right or wrong if the approach was right or wrong.
Yeah.
I What I do say is people are gonna try stuff, and for you sitting at the sidelines, are you going to put your hand in and see if it actually works and validate for yourself, or just observe from the sidelines? That's also up to you. But understand that if you're doing it, it's just like Kickstarter. You're taking a risk, you're taking a small gamble, like, okay, it might
Are
not
people
actually
enough
get here.
aware of the risk factor?
No, that I can say for sure. No, the general populace does not understand risk, and
Because
that's, I think, something.
if you
Risk.
ask me, it's a bit of all three. I feel it has been a bust for some, a bubble for others, and a future business for others as well. It has
Yeah.
all elements of all three, if you ask me, when it comes to NFT. It's the only one that I would label a bust from
And
everything we've
there's also
discussed.
categories, right? the,
Yeah,
the categories.
yeah, but no, okay. ICOs, I might say it's a bust as well.
Yeah, I see was a bust.
Yeah,
I see
I
was a
might.
bust.
Yeah. So I think NFTs goes in the same direction. The only reason I would also consider it a bubble is because it had so much potential, and
I
people
I
got
s-
into it for the wrong reasons. I think that's really and I mean that's the internet in a nutshell, basically, because it's always like, hey, we could do so much good with this, and there's so much opportunity, and they were like,
let's
ah, but
sell
this
photos
is
of
real
Pepe's.
hype. This is what it's really about, and they're like, ah. And then a couple of years later, you realize that people just bought into the hype a little bit too much, and yeah, that is what it does feel like. Um, and I also think that um,
I
I
do still think there's potential. It's just gonna take, now it's dying down, and the 1% that's gonna survive the next wave
yeah,
might get something, but that's just a wild guess.
yeah. So, how many NFTs have you purchased in the past month?
None. I
How many
just
NFTs have you gotten in the past month?
Oh, I get scam dropped a lot of NFTs in my wallets because people just scan wallets that have certain NFTs and then they drop you something. So I don't even check those.
Have you ever sold a scam drop?
No,
just to see
I
what you get realistically could get out of it.
no, I that's also a risk. I don't even interact with it because then it's a risk of security risk. The moment you interact and sign something without understanding it, that's you're signing away your funds.
Interesting. Last topic for today. I think the talk in 2023 has been mainly about AI. So,
I think it's in a bubble.
okay.
I think AI is in a bubble right now. There is, for me, definitely potential and use cases, but the companies starting up around it, it's in a bubble. If you look at the actual valuations of these companies and what they're using, there's, I think, only a handful of core models that all of the other AIs are built on. It's basically, oh, we're starting an AI company. We're using our backbone is open GPT. Let's slap a fresh paint of clothes on it. And here, this is your virtual assistant.
So, is it that AI just isn't far along enough? Or is it that people
The,
still,
the moment you get mainstream attention, mainstream media in a short span, because something sparked it and you get that little virality, you enter bubble territory because it doesn't grow and settle in organically, slowly over time for people to take it in.
but here's the thing though. If you look at Google Chrome and Gmail,
Hmm.
and you look at Google Plus and Google Wave and Google Buzz,
All the things that Google killed that were amazing projects.
we're
Yes, I know.
bubbles. No, but we're bubbles, right? So for me, Google Plus could be labeled as a bust even,
Yeah, it is.
right? But Google Chrome, that's a business.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not always the case that if something kind of blows up and becomes important, and after that, doesn't mean that it becomes a bubble straight away, right?
Yeah, for sure. But there is too much. Did you see the same attention on Google Chrome, the same mainstream hype on it that people were developing
Okay,
plugins,
it was much more
companies
silent.
around
I have to
around Google
agree, it was
Chrome?
much more silent. I have to completely agree, it was a lot more silent. Yeah.
So that's how I kind of, for me, label bubbles. The moment you get the mainstream media and you get that virality and you get companies raising millions of dollars for a slide deck that without a functional project using a framework or a core functionality of an open model that's been made public, then yeah, it's a bubble.
If you would compare AI to the metaverse from a technological implementation standpoint, which one do you feel will be talked about more in 5 years' time?
In 5 years' time, I do feel like AI will be more rooted in, just like Chrome has been over the years, uh, because it has actual use cases already and people can use it day to day. Like average people going to school, people at work can use it day to day and they get the familiarity out of it. So it becomes part of their natural language over time. Whereas the metaverse, it's still something they see and don't necessarily engage with themselves. So I think AI will be more ingrained in 5 years' time, whereas the metaverse, the virtual world, will still be that might be the bubble by then again. until we get actual devices to interact with it that aren't like $2,000 Apple headset or something.
How many people in the world should be involved for something to move from a bubble into business? And just to
I,
give
I,
you a perspective, to
yeah, I
give
might.
you a perspective, I think you need around 400 million active users on your social media platform to be considered sustainable social media platform, like globally, in a global sense.
And what's that sustainability based on? Based on
Based
returning
on there will,
visitors,
yeah, there
activity.
will be enough people caring in the world that your platform doesn't die down. And also, there are enough people active on the platform that people or companies are willing to invest in it to keep it running. And if you
So
compare that to how many Bitcoin users are there active, how many crypto users are active, how many ICOs, people investing in ICOs, how many people owning NFTs, and how many people using AI, just to get a general perspective of like, hey, this is not gonna go away. This will be here in 10 years' time.
yeah, there's a threshold, like a critical mass that you need to reach to get to escape velocity, right? To be able to sustain. So I don't know. I can't really
This is a question
estimate on that.
for people that who have tuned in to wonder about. Feel free to leave a comment behind on one of our socials. You already seen our YouTube slash at Confoes below. As always, we also are on Instagram at Confoes on Instagram. So are on Substack. Leave us a comment if you've heard or listened to this or watched this episode. Leave us a comment what you think would be a critical mass for a technological advancement to evolve from bubble territory to become mainstream and to business. How many people do you believe should interact with the product or the service before we can say, hey, this might actually be around in 10 years from now? I think that was what was it for this episode of Social Convos. Diego, some closing thoughts before I close it off.
Eh, I would say just try stuff, scan our code. You don't even need to give a tip. Just scan, interface with it, just to get used to it, to get used to the things we talked about today. And then maybe in a year, 5 years' time, you might actually use it.
That's a great way to close it off. This has been Social Confoes, episode 132. We hope to see you back next time. Same place, same time. Bye bye.